Yo, what is up everybody, it's Joe the Great here and welcome back to another Naruto reaction video here today. And today we got yet another video by NCHAMMER23, and I thought this video concept in particular was quite intriguing. And as you can tell by the title, this is What If Rock Lee Joined the Akatsuki? So folks, me personally, I never thought about this possibility within the Naruto verse. In fact, I don't even know how this would come to be, even if I tried to think about it. Right, Rock Lee was a very dedicated shinobi, known for his work ethic and his tenacity and ferocity, which is why he became one of the best at taijutsu, similar to his sensei, Mike Guy. So the scenario in where Rock Lee would join the Akatsuki is one that is hard to muster up, at least for me personally, right? He'd have to be a completely different person or go through some traumatic event that were to change his whole philosophy, similar to Obito Uchiha, right? When he lost Rin, that's what set it off. That's what served as the catalyst for him to change as an individual and join the dark side, quote unquote. So I'm very intrigued to see where NC Hammer goes with this one. And now he creates this canvas. But before we begin, any of you really appreciate it, hit that like button, turn on bell notification to stay updated with yours truly. And if you're new and you enjoy, man, and you mess with the kid, make sure to hit that sub button below, because once you do, become part of the family forever. But let's not waste any more time, screen. See what NC Hammer says today.
Joshinism. We know so little about it, and yet it is one of the most interesting and talked about topics in the entirety of Naruto. I mean, how can a religion only practiced by two canonical people in the entirety of both Naruto and Boruto dominate so much of the talking space in this show? Well, one, because the two people that worship it are pretty cool, and two, because the religion quite literally gives you immortality. Well, only if you're like a super good boy for Lord Joshin, that is. So because of the fact that Lord Joshin's blessing gives you immortality, people often throw out the idea of certain people who never worshiped Lord Joshin getting Lord Joshin's favor. And these people, now with immortality on their side, would be busted. And you can argue that basically anybody given immortality is going to be exponentially stronger, but there's some people who would help more than others. So today, we're gonna talk about the person who would have the most to gain from acquiring Lord Joshin's favor, and how exactly they would find themselves in this situation. That's right, we're doing a what if today. I usually tend to stick to more educational and concrete fact videos, but I've been having a lot of fun exploring what ifs, and I feel like I have the creative mind for it, so here we go. Before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're thinking, what if Nick played video games? Well, I got a whole other YouTube page dedicated to that, and it's called NCHAMMER23. Go give it a follow. So, Joshinism. It would be incredible if every good guy got it, and it would be better if every bad guy didn't have it. But unfortunately, the religion as a whole kind of is inherently better for bad people. And for those of you who haven't seen my Is Lord Joshin an Otsutsuki video, by the way, I can't blame you, it was 8 months ago, I'm gonna break down what Joshinism is, at least what we know about it. You see, most of what we know about Joshinism actually derives from light novels. In both Konoha Hidan and Akatsuki Hidan, we were given views into Joshinism. Akatsuki Hidan is a light novel where every duo in the Akatsuki gets a chapter. So naturally, Kakuzo and Hidan got a chapter. And in this chapter, Hidan actually goes into Joshinism a little bit. Essentially, he explains it to somebody and says, in order to gain favor from Lord Joshin, you have to kill your neighbors. Now, Hidan doesn't mean neighbors in a physical sense. He means more in an emotional sense. Those who you live with, laugh with, drink with, those are your neighbors. Essentially, they're your friends, but they're never your friends because in Joshinism, you have to kill them. So it's more about people that you can tolerate around you. If you kill these people in large enough numbers, you will eventually get the blessing of Lord Joshin. And this blessing comes with immortality and special jutsu. For Hidan, it was his ability to transfer any damage he does to himself to an opponent whose blood he drinks. For Ryuki, somebody who comes from Konoha Hidan and in Boruto when they did the Steam Chronicles, he had the ability to put blood on a voodoo doll and then do damage to it. But Ryuki was actually never able to gain Lord Joshin's favor, aka immortality. I mean, he had gained a little bit of his favor, that's why he was able to use the voodoo doll trick, but he had never reached the heights that Hidan reached. But this makes sense considering the fact that Hidan described himself as Lord Joshin's best experiment. Essentially, Hidan killed more people than anybody else who had ever worshipped Lord Joshin. And because he was so fervent in his belief, praying before every fight to get a good kill and begging for forgiveness if he didn't get a good kill from Lord Joshin, he got the blessing of immortality. So that's basically Joshinism 101. Kill those close to you in high enough quantity and eventually you will get immortality. Technically, Ryuki says you have to kill a bunch of people simultaneously as a large sacrifice to Lord Joshin, but we don't know if this is entirely true because once again, Ryuki never got the blessing. Hidan getting the blessing of Lord Joshin was actually very important for him because Hidan actually can't use ninjutsu. He was very weak before he had the blessing of Lord Joshin. I mean, he wasn't weak. He was still an incredibly talented kenjutsu and taijutsu user, but that was about all he could do. And it's not like he had other power-ups that taijutsu and kenjutsu users use. He didn't have Samehada or the split swords or 8 gates. That last one is going to be the one we focus on today. Essentially, this video spun out of a comment on my last video where somebody asked,
have we ever considered if Rock Lee got the blessing of Lord Joshin?
Essentially, the idea is if Rock Lee was immortal, he would be able to recover from all of the injuries brought on by the 8 gates. And the thing is, that's not incorrect. It's canonical knowledge that the only things that can kill somebody who has the blessing of Lord Joshin is not eating. We technically don't even know if you can lose the blessing of Lord Joshin. We just assume that you can because of how fervently Hidan continues to pray to Lord Joshin even after receiving his blessing, which implies to us if you were to stop doing that, it's a possibility Lord Joshin would just yoink it away. So yes, the person we're talking about today, the person who would gain the most from acquiring the blessing of Lord Joshin and the what if as to how they would achieve that is Rock Lee. Because once again, I will reiterate, Rock Lee would be able to open to the 8th gate, die, and then essentially come back to life. The way that the 8 gates works, especially the 8th gate works, is essentially you pump all of the chakra in your body to your heart. This increases your heart rate hundreds of times over, and the heart pumps so fast it increases the temperature of your blood in your chakra to a literal boiling point. The red aura you see around my guy after he activates the 8th gate is actually his blood evaporating out of his pores. So the way that I see it, if somebody with the blessing of Lord Joshin activated the 8th gate, they would be able to use the 8th gate for as long as Mike Guy did, but after they collapse, they would just have to lay on the ground for a little bit while their body reconstructed itself. We know this isn't an issue because Hidan's entire move against Asuma was to stab himself in the heart. So having an exploded and or stabbed heart really isn't an issue for somebody with the blessing of Lord Joshin. And if you look at it on a smaller level than the 8th gate, like the 7th gate or the 6th gate, those broken bones that people would get from using the evening elephant or the morning peacock would heal almost instantly. Now, this wouldn't mean that you could use the 6th or the 7th gate longer, it still requires chakra, but it does mean that you could use it more effectively, and that there would essentially be no consequences for you activating it. And this idea isn't necessarily crazy. I mean, both Hidan and Rock Lee are people who can't use ninjutsu or genjutsu. So to assume they would go down a similar path in order to acquire power isn't the craziest thought of all time, until you consider what Rock Lee would have to do to acquire the blessing.
Interesting
of Lord Joshin.
concept.
Because if you think about it for even longer than a second, you'll realize that Rock Lee has a motto, that he's only allowed to use the 8 gates to protect those important to him, which means that Rock Lee's entire power system revolves around protecting people, not killing them, specifically protecting those close to him. Now, it's not like he needs to be protecting someone close to him for his 8 gates to activate, but it is something he holds himself to, which is actually almost worse for this theory, because if it was just like a situational demand that somebody needs to be in danger for him to activate the 8 gates, that's fine. He just won't use the 8 gates for a little while. But the fact that it's emotional and psychological and part of his personality means that he's probably not going to mesh too well with Joshinism. At least the Rock Lee we know would. Now is where we begin to enter what I call what if territory. How does Rock Lee, somebody notorious for wanting to protect those close to him, end up with the person who's trying to teach him how to kill those closest to him? Well, a couple of things need to change, but it's really nothing that major. Essentially, the entirety of Naruto is the same until we get to Gaara versus Rock Lee. Now, the fight goes the same way. Rock Lee loses and becomes crippled from Gaara, sand strangling him. And now Rock Lee is unable to fight. The way that this gets fixed in the show is that Tsunade comes into the fold and she puts him under a surgery where there's a 50% chance he lives and a 50% chance he dies. But if he lives, he's going to be able to fight again. I would like to propose a third option. I want to say that Rock Lee goes under Tsunade's knife. I guess more like her chakra scalpel. And while under the knife, something goes wrong. Rock Lee's legs and arms and all of that are fixed to a small degree, meaning that he can walk and maybe even run around. But the idea of fighting will absolutely put him back in the hospital. So essentially, Rock Lee is relegated to a regular life. And there's nothing wrong with this except for the fact that it would fly in the face of everything Rock Lee has tried to accomplish. His hard work would be for nothing. And there's unfortunately nothing he can do about it. The #1 medical expert could not fix him. At least the #1 medical expert in Konoha. You see, Tsunade has been out and about in the world. She's been gambling her way through every village she can find. And one of those villages was most definitely the village hidden in the hot water. You see, the village hidden in the hot water is Konoha's northeastern cousin. Not really cousin. I don't know why I said cousins. They share a border. Regardless, this is a hot springs land. Essentially, it's a leisure town built on neutrality. They have no military force of their own and therefore just focus on hospitality and tourism. Two things Tsunade in her infinite money and gambling binge would like to go to. But the thing is, there's one bad thing that came out of the village of hot water, and that's Hidan. So maybe as the forefront medical expert, maybe in the entirety of the world, she heard about a man who was able to heal himself from anything. And while she was never able to affirm whether or not this man existed, there was enough people that knew about him that she figured he did. And since she wasn't necessarily in the place to be looking into medical practices, considering she was just drunk for a couple of years, she never looked into Hidan. But after failing this surgery and realizing there's nothing she can do for Rock Lee and seeing how despondent he is, she confers that information to Rock Lee about the presence of a man who's able to heal from absolutely anything. So essentially, she sends Rock Lee out on a mission to find this man, to heal himself, to give him something to do while the rest of his teammates are out training and getting stronger. Think about the timeline of this for a second. This would be right before the Sasuke retrieval arc, but Rock Lee can't head out immediately. In fact, the Sasuke retrieval arc happens while Rock Lee is still stuck in the village recovering from the surgery. You see, one of the biggest plot points of the Sasuke retrieval arc is the fact that Rock Lee takes some sake with him and goes out to fight Kimimaro. And he pretty much backs Kimimaro into a corner until Kimimaro unlocks the second form of his curse mark, and then Gaara saves Rock Lee. But here's the thing, both Gaara and Rock Lee fought Kimimaro at an all-out tilt. And the only thing that stopped Kimimaro from winning was his heart. Essentially, Kimimaro was about to kill Gaara and Rock Lee, but his disease, which might be similar to the one that Itachi has, killed him as he was about to do it. So if you figure in the fact that Rock Lee even had a small amount to do with tiring out Kimimaro so he couldn't kill the both of them, the fact that Rock Lee wouldn't be around to help Gaara against Kimimaro would mean Gaara would die in that fight. Gaara, the man who had just crippled Rock Lee. Gaara, a man who seems infinitely powerful to Rock Lee, considering the fact that he broke every bone in his body. And I'm not saying that Rock Lee would like Gaara. He has absolutely no reason to like Gaara at this moment. But Rock Lee would hear that Gaara and the Sand siblings came to help in the Sasuke retrieval, meaning that even though Gaara was the person who put him in this situation, him and Gaara were on the same sides when Gaara died. And thus, somebody who was stronger than Rock Lee at what was his peak at the time wasn't able to take out an enemy, showing Rock Lee the distance between him and where some other people are in terms of strength, especially now that he can't fight. We all see how upset Rock Lee gets whenever he loses, or whenever he's forced to face the fact that there might be people stronger than him. And we all saw how he reacted to losing Neji. To assume that the loss of Gaara and the identification of the distance in power between him and some of the enemies out there would push him to desperate measures isn't insane. So with a fire lit in his heart to establish his power back in the world in order to fight enemies stronger than Gaara, he heads out for the village hidden in hot water. water. Now, Hidan is a rogue ninja. It's not going to be easy to find him in the village hidden in hot water. At this moment, the Akatsuki absolutely exists. They haven't caught any Jinchuriki, but they're out there destroying villages. There's like a million different ways that Rock Lee could bump into Hidan. Maybe he just happens upon him. Maybe Hidan's trying to rob him because he's pathetic looking. Maybe Hidan hears that somebody's looking for him and he's curious about it. But the most likely way that they bump into each other, to me, is that Rock Lee is walking around the village hidden in the hot water saying he's looking for a man who can heal from any wound, and thus expressing that he would like this ability. Now, Hidan is always looking to spread the word of Lord Joshin, so when he hears that there's somebody out there looking for him and to gain his ability, he finds a new possible follower for Lord Joshin. So the likeliest scenario that they meet, to me, is that Hidan goes and finds Rock Lee. Now, most people will be like, yeah, but wouldn't Hidan just murder Rock Lee? Maybe. Hidan does love murdering people, but I actually think Hidan would like Rock Lee's spunk. Hidan is a very loud and boisterous personality, just like Rock Lee. And while Rock Lee is usually loud and boisterous in a positive way and Hidan is in a negative way, I still feel like he would see a little bit of himself in Rock Lee, especially when Rock Lee explains to him that he can't use ninjutsu, and the one thing that he had, taijutsu, have been taken away from him. I feel as though Hidan could relate to this on account of the fact that he can't use ninjutsu, and the fact that he relies on the blessing of Lord Joshin and his ken/taijutsu in order to give people up to Lord Joshin. The real problem becomes when Hidan explains to Rock Lee how to achieve the blessing of Lord Joshin. No matter how despondent.
Alright, so this is my first issue with NC Hammer's theory. He's presupposing that a malicious character like Hidan would somehow be appealed to emotionally by Rock Lee's similar personality. I believe that would be very, very unlikely. The best way to get Hidan to cooperate is being superior to him, right? When Kakuzu, Itachi, and Konan went out to recruit him, they had to, quote-unquote, beat him into submission. They weren't able to appeal to him emotionally. That's not going to happen. It's very unlikely. What would most likely happen is Rock Lee would go out looking for him. He'd find him. And Hidan, being the psychotic, malicious individual he is, would simply kill him. That's all that would take place. So, this wouldn't be the best option for Rock Lee. And going back to Tsunade being Hokage and knowing that Rock Lee can't really defend himself, why would she send him out to a foreign land like the village of Hot Water to look for someone they know nothing of? A man that cannot die. Why would she simply send him alone to go look for him? So, a lot of these things that NC Hammer is proposing are out of character on the balance of probabilities for several individuals. Right? Hidan doesn't cooperate unless you beat him into submission like the Akatsuki did. That's how they got a lot of the Akatsuki members, actually. Right? Deidara, a very prideful man. They had to essentially humiliate him for him to cooperate. Itachi had to humiliate him with his genjutsu and show him true art, right? It happened several times. So, these individuals don't cooperate that easily, and they definitely won't be appealed to emotionally. Definitely not someone as psychotic and malicious as Hidan. However, the theory is fun. It's a fun little theory, but I believe in character, it is very unlikely and not plausible that Hidan or Tsunade would go about things in this fashion. But still, it's a very fun concept. Let's continue.
Or hurt or angry Rock Lee is, he's never going to accept a religion where he has to kill those close to him. It's just not who he is, unless he changed the people that were close to him. We all know that Rock Lee would never try to kill Naruto or Might Guy or Sakura or anybody from the Leaf for that matter. But Lord Joshin doesn't ask that you kill good people. Lord Joshin asks that you kill the people close to you, your neighbors. Now here's the biggest stretch in my entire story, the fact that I think Rock Lee would be able to identify this loophole and use it in a way for good, because I think we all understand that Rock Lee is not the best or brightest, but it's my what if series, so I'm gonna do it anyways. So Rock Lee identifies this loophole and becomes a rogue ninja, you know, crossing out the headband, everything, and he trains under Hidan for years. You don't just gain the favor of Lord Joshin immediately. Ryuki had been trying to gain the favor of Lord Joshin for years, and never achieved it. Rock Lee essentially becomes Itachi 2.0. He's an embedded spy within the Akatsuki traveling with Hidan and Kakuzo. The only problem is he doesn't have much in the way of power right now. So good, bad, strong, or weak, it's hard for Rock Lee to get any kills off. Luckily for him, his base strength is enough to wipe out some lower level criminals without needing to go full out or open any of the gates. The question becomes, who is Rock Lee going to kill? I mean, it's not like he's gonna sneak one over Hidan or Kakuzo, not in his current state, at least. The Akatsuki organization is a lot bigger than just the people in cloaks. Even in its beginning, there was many outside members, all from the Hidden Reign. And Boruto has actually showed us that there was a lot of Akatsuki sympathizers out in the world. Look at Boro's Church, or the Outers of Kara. These are people who identify with the ideology of the Akatsuki, but weren't necessarily strong enough to get a nice cool cloak. These are the people Rock Lee kills. Now, these are relatively minor characters that nobody will miss, and there's a reason they didn't get the cloaks, because they're not strong enough. Rock Lee is still fast and strong, and maybe gets injured in every other fight, but is strong enough to overpower these lesser characters. And as the years go on and Rock Lee's body count accumulates, let's say the 3 years between Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, Rock Lee's doing this, eventually the fervor and the will he's put into it gains him Lord Joshin's blessing. And as Lord Joshin descends from the fiery pits of hell, he gives Rock Lee immortality. Well, at least invulnerability. And just like that, Rock Lee's bones become rock solid. His chakra networks reconnect. He feels a power surging through him that he hasn't felt in years. Everything he's done up to this moment, the amount of blood he has soaked his hands with, it's all been worth it. And you might think, well, won't Hidan be upset that he's killing Akatsuki sympathizers? No, Hidan wants to kill Kakuzo. Hidan only joined the Akatsuki because Nagato told him that it would protect him from the ninjas looking to collect the bounty on his head. Hidan has very little allegiance to the Akatsuki, and much more allegiance to Lord Joshin. It's not even the craziest idea of all time to assume that Hidan might have killed a couple of Akatsuki sympathizers because they were close to it. He even admits to Kakuzo that he wants to kill him, but he hates Kakuzo so much that he doesn't consider him a neighbor. And Kakuzo will more likely than not be way too focused on money to even wonder what Rock Lee is up to. But the real question becomes, now that Rock Lee has acquired the favor of Lord Joshin, what's next? Do you just keep mopping up criminals from the inside, or do you go back to the Leaf? Well, that really depends on how you look at the situation. Essentially, there's two camps here. The first being, you assume after you receive the blessing of Lord Joshin, you can never lose it. The second being that after you receive the blessing of Lord Joshin, if you do not continue to offer up blessings, you lose the blessing. Depending on what camp you subscribe to, basically writes Rock Lee's story. If Rock Lee has to continually give up blessings to Lord Joshin, he essentially becomes a Shadow Hokage. In the same way that Itachi was essentially Hiruzen Shadow Hokage, if you don't count Danzo, Rock Lee would kind of become Tsunade Shadow Hokage. He would be an embedded spy in the Akatsuki trying to get close to all members of the Akatsuki so he could eventually kill them, serving the double purpose of helping out Konoha and lifting blessings up to Lord Joshin. He'd probably be able to do it. There's basically nothing that's shown us a separation between Might Guy and Rock Lee in terms of strength, except for the fact that Might Guy can use a little bit of ninjutsu. So if we're assuming that Might Guy and Rock Lee scale to similar levels, that means that Rock Lee, with the 8 gate open, would be able to defeat Madara in 10 Tails mode. There is not a single person in the Akatsuki who scales even close to that. You see, Shikamaru was able to trap Hidan because Hidan was just kind of an average guy with one trick. Now imagine you have Hidan's trick, aka you can't bleed in a fight against a man can open to the 8th gate. Let's not forget the fact that not only could he just kill you with a Night Guy, he could also just get a little blood from you opening the 3rd gate, draw a circle around him, and stab himself in the heart. Then he doesn't have to worry about recovering from a pile of ash. And I know what you're saying,
Well, Nick, how are his neighbors the Akatsuki members if he's actually just there to kill them?
it's called tolerability. Rock Lee would have to focus on not hating the members of the Akatsuki. He would view them more as targets, allowing himself to like them as people, but understanding that they are his targets, making a disconnect between his own personal feelings and his allegiance to the Leaf, a lot like Itachi. Because the members of the Akatsuki are likable people, well, some of them at least on a very personal, not scaled out kind of view, because all of them are mass murderers. Like, I would get a beer with most of them. The only problem with this storyline is the fact that Rock Lee would never be able to return to the Leaf. Because if Rock Lee returns to the Leaf, his neighbors become the people he actually loves. Might Guy, Sakura, Naruto, Neji, Tenten. You get it? So you would either have to kill them or lose the blessing of Lord Joshin. And once it's lost, who knows? Maybe you have to do another 3 years of hardcore killing to get it back. So Rock Lee's story would kind of become he just is a shadow operative who exists in every criminal group he can find, murdering them slowly from the inside out. It's a super metal story and way better of a timeline for Rock Lee than what we got in Naruto, but that's because Kishimoto wanted him to die in the Sasuke retrieval arc, and therefore the rest of Naruto he didn't know what to do with this character that everyone kind of loved. It's actually true, he was actually supposed to die in the Sasuke retrieval arc, and then his editors were like, what are you talking about? Everyone loves this character, we can't do that. And he was like, well, I haven't written him into any of the rest of the story. Same thing with Neji. The other timeline in this multiverse of What If is that after you achieve the blessing of Lord Joshin, you just have it. So after these couple of years of just bathing his hands in blood, Rock Lee is able to return to the Leaf. But he's an incredibly different person than when he left. He's lost his cheery demeanor. I mean, it's hard not to do that after you murder people for a couple of years. And often he pontificates about whether or not it was worth what he did in order to achieve the power he now has. You see, because to me, this would create a very interesting Itachi-like character. He starts out innocent with this idea of the world that hard work can overcome anything. But then life gives him a problem that hard work can't really fix. At least hard work as he understands it. You see, because if there was anybody on Earth who was going to figure out how to get the blessing of Lord Joshin outside of Hidan, it would be Rock Lee. This is a man who willed himself to be one of the most powerful
I don't know about that.
in the entirety of the Naruto verse with just
I'll get my thoughts after.
The question is no longer willingness to do push-ups, it's willingness to do heinous acts. Yes, it's still hard work, but the moral spectrum has shifted. Are you able to work hard at a goal regardless of what the work is? And if you are, and you end up at the destination you were looking to end up at, was that trip worth it? Rock Lee then dedicates the rest of his life to protecting those around him with his newfound ability in order to make himself feel better about what he had to do in those years. Yes, they were bad guys, but did they need to die? Were their deaths worth my abilities? And whether or not you believe their deaths were worth the abilities you got, you now have to make their deaths as worth it as possible. Because every day Rock Lee doesn't do something with the ability he gained, those lives weigh ever pressing on him. That's the thing about joshinism, for me at least. Somebody approaching it with an actual moral spectrum intact would be very interesting. It raises the question of what would you do for damn near infinite power? What would you do to protect those around you? I believe Rock Lee represents one of the best talking points in all of Naruto, the fact that hard work overcomes. But I believe the spectrum of his question was too minor. Hard work isn't all push-ups. Sometimes hard work is looking in the mirror every morning and facing up against what you've done. And I believe that would be a very interesting timeline for Rock Lee. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think there would be a better person to inherit the favor of Lord Joshin? Tell me below in the comments. And while you're down there, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. Listen, I'm not saying if I was Rock Lee, I would use the whole Gara shattered my entire body to start a gym in Konoha and just kind of coast out for the rest of my life. But come on, man, you really want to be out there watching Neji die?
Alright, so I definitely want to get my thoughts on this video. It was an interesting concept, but I believe, again, some of NC Hammer's presuppositions are quite outlandish. Rock Lee is one of the most devoted individuals in all of Naruto. One of the most pure-hearted individuals in all of Naruto. He has a dogmatic devotion to integrity and to gaining respect through hard work, right? So he is one of the last individuals that would conform to the ways of joshinism and to the ways of Hidan. Hidan and Rock Lee are night and day. Yes, their personality on the surface is similar. Sure, they're both flamboyant and they're both characters, right? But Hidan is the epitome of psychotic, malicious intent. That's what he is. That's his whole persona. Rock Lee is the opposite of that. He's integrity, he's honor, and he's hard work and dedication. That's what he is. So, in what world would Rock Lee go to Hidan, learn about his ways, and join and conform to his ways? That is extremely, extremely unlikely. Very unlikely that that would ever take place. His level of conviction and resolve is comparable to that of Naruto, Itachi, Kakashi, etc. He's not going to flip sides here. Most certainly not. And the scenario itself has some flaws. Again, Tsunade would not allow an injured shinobi to go into foreign lands to meet up with a foreign man they know nothing about. Tsunade would never allow that. him out of surgery. She's not going to go up to him and say, hey, go to the land of hot water and look for this guy we know nothing about. Good luck. Bye. That would never happen. She would send a team out, and they would learn that he's a psychotic, malicious individual. They would not send a injured shinobi that can barely run out to some foreign land. That would never happen. Also, like I said previously, Hidan is psychotic and malicious in intent. He would not take in this injured kid and teach him the ways of joshinism. I know he's devoted to Jahin, right? He's devoted to this god persona. That doesn't necessarily imply that he's taking other followers. The only way to get someone like that to cooperate is through superiority. When he was recruited, Kakuzu and Itachi and Conan were present. He had to be beaten down into submission, essentially. A lot of those guys had to. Deidara was the same way. Itachi had to beat him into submission, humiliate him, make him realize that he's not the top dog, and that he has to do what they say. That's the only way to get someone of that nature to cooperate with you. They're rabid dogs, essentially. People like Deidara, people like Hidan, even Kakuzu. Kakuzu is about money. He's more intelligent than those two, probably IQ-wise, but he's rabid. He's evil. He's selfish. Why would Hidan appeal emotionally to some random kid that's injured? That would make no sense. No sense. He would kill that kid on the spot. No questions asked. Just like he's killed many other individuals. He would never do that. He would never do that. That's very, very unlikely. Now, I get the concept. It's supposed to be interesting and exciting, but the what ifs that I enjoy are the ones that are plausible, right? The ones that are plausible. The ones that represent what characters would most likely do. Like, what if Minato died? Stuff like that. This one is just something that would never happen. It is very, very unlikely. Damn near impossible, to be quite honest. Someone like Rock Lee, who's that pure of heart and that devoted to his sensei and to his village, would never do what Hidan does. Ever. I think he'd rather stay crippled, to be honest. He'd rather stay in a wheelchair. He'd rather stay a normal civilian than to conform to those ways. Itachi was a whole different situation. He was put in a dilemma. The dilemma of all dilemmas. Danzo basically said, it's this way or that way. Kill your clan or there will be war and your brother will die along with your clan. That he had no choice. He had no choice. And he made the tough choice. Rock Lee has a choice, and he's certainly not going to conform to some evil man like Hidan. There's no way. It's very unlikely. For this scenario to even work out the way that NC Hammer painted, you'd have to presuppose some outlandish things, and these characters would have to do things that are out of character, essentially. So, so that's my thoughts on the video. My honest thoughts. I think the idea is interesting, sure. Rock Lee is a cool character. The Akatsuki is a cool organization. Rock Lee has taijutsu. Hidan does too. They don't have ninjutsu nor genjutsu. Sure, it's a cool concept on the surface, but when you dive in deeper, it's just not very possible. And because of that, for me personally, it's just not very interesting because it's impossible. It's like saying, what if Naruto joined the Akatsuki? It would never happen. At least later on. It'd be kind of plausible early on when he was ostracized from the village as a child. That would be the best point. But then also it wouldn't make sense because he was the nine-tail Jinchuriki. They would kill him anyway. They would extract the nine tails from him, so he could never join the Akatsuki either. So, cool video, I suppose, right? Interesting concept and theory, but very, very unlikely that this would ever take place. So, let me know your thoughts on it. Did you think it was cool? Impossible? Maybe you do think it's possible. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm always interested to hear you guys' thoughts. And of course, if you have any other recommendations, let me know in the comment section as well. But that's going to wrap it up, and I'll catch you in the next video. This is Jay the Great signing out. Peace.